Well, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Denmark. Please for a short visit here, for a couple of minutes, 15 minutes I think I have. My name is Christian Skov. I'm an associate professor at DTU Aqua, which is part of the technical university in Denmark. I consider myself as a fisheries manager. I work with fisheries management. I'm also a researcher. I try to find evidence for what I'm talking about as far as possible. It's not easy. That's why I'm sometimes a bit blurred when I say stuff, because I'm not perfectly sure about if it's right. But that's how it is as a scientist. Also, I'm a teacher. And actually, I'd like to highlight that I, last year, created a course called Recreational Fisheries, Management, Human Dimensions, and Biological Impacts. It's a 5 ECTS course that we give at the Technical University of Denmark. I hope by that I can sort of educate new potential fisheries managers and hopefully give them a bit of my ideas on the way. So, if you have students by any chance, this is an online course, most of it, and you can participate basically from all over the world. So, contact me if you're interested. DTU Aqua, just a little bit about our institution, section of fisheries and inland fisheries and ecology. We do research, we do monitoring, and we do give advice about fish and fisheries. And we consider ourselves a major player in the management of recreational fisheries. And this is the management model of recreational fisheries in Denmark. So here we have what's most important, right? That's the fish populations. And we all in Denmark have a goal about self-sustaining populations, at least freshwater, where I'm mainly working, also in marine, of course. And we are here, we interact with stakeholders, the anglers, angling clubs, the fishermen. We give advice to the legislation system, to the ministry. And we also do management, and we have different management tools. I'll come back to that. So this is the model, and I would like to emphasize that there's really a short distance. If somebody gets an idea about the thing they want to improve in the fisheries, in the legislation, we are quite operational. We have good contacts to the ministry, good contacts to the angler associations, so we can make things happen quite swiftly, I would say. So what's funding all this? Fishing license funds. As an angler, you have to pay €25 per year to go fishing, national fishing license. And that money is used for research at our institute, also for direct management, for habitat restorations, and also quite a bit, unfortunately, for administration of all that. But anyways, this is how it's set up. So, just quite a brief outline of this talk, a little bit about demography. I guess you already know the numbers, percentage of males, stuff like that, but I'll give them anyway, quite comparable to what we already heard. Some socioeconomics, a few management examples, and then I'll talk a bit about what challenges I see from my perspective. This is Denmark, quite a small country compared to Sweden and Finland. 5.5 million inhabitants. We have quite a bit of fishing opportunities, I would say, although the numbers compared to what we just heard from Sweden and Finland is ridiculously low. 9,000 lakes, and I even call ponds more than 1.5 hectare a lake, which is debatable, I would say. Anyway, quite a high number of rivers and streams, and we have a huge shoreline, and then we have all the seawater where also recreational fishing is taking place. And I've written to where it's public in some places, otherwise it's private fishing rights and stuff like that. That's not so important right now. 15 to 20% of the Danes 18 to 65 years old are anglers. There was a survey in 2008, I'll come back to that, where 6,000, they calculated that 6,000 Danes angled in 2008, 300,000 of those on a regular basis. That adds to something about 15% of the Danes. An average angler has about 10 fishing trips a year. So depending on which number you believe in, it's 3 to 6 million fishing trips a year. That's quite a bit, I would say. I was surprised by the US numbers, by the way. I thought it was something about 300,000 fishing trips. Well, there we go. There are also several angling associations. The most important is the Denmark Sportsfiskerforbund. The core is giving a presentation after me. He's from there. And there's hundreds of fishing clubs that organize fishing waters, and you can be members of. Also, I think it's important. I enjoyed the presentation this morning about setting into recreational fishing into a frame. And I also would like to say that we have to distinguish between angling with a reel and rod and also recreational fishing with nets and passive tackles. And we do that very much in Denmark. And here I'll focus on angling, although that 30,000 persons buy the permit for this last year is still quite a bit, but I see that it's decreasing in numbers, the guys who do that. Most people are involved in angling with a reel and rod. So, there was a report, a survey conducted in 2008, a report came out in 2010, initiated by the Ministry of Food and Agriculture and Fisheries, that tried to give some ideas about the behavior and the socioeconomics of anglers in Denmark. It was based on a web panel. It came forward earlier today that socioeconomics, it's nice with the numbers, but this is a science. And it's not, it's really complicated if you go into it, how to get these numbers right. And so this is a web panel, so for what that is worth, but that was the best we had, and it gave us some numbers. I was not involved in this study, but I am presenting it anyway, because that's what we had, numbers, and numbers seems to be important. So, where does the anglers in Denmark mainly fish? Well, coast fishing is really important. And I have some, I will not read these out, but you can see the coast fishing is 38% of the Danes, they say they mainly fish at coasts. Lake fishing is important, but please note that quite a substantial 16% of that is put and take fishing. So that's where you have these lakes or ponds where you put out fish and you can buy a license and go fishing there. That's really popular, not least among tourists. Stream fishing, 16%, and sea fishing also quite important, 26%, which I'm sure Kian is interested in. So, what methods? Very trivial perhaps, but spin fishing is quite popular. Hook and bait, and this is my contribution to recruitment. This is my son, who caught his first roach here, and he's really happy. So yeah, you have to teach your young kids to fish. I agree. Deep water jig fishing, out on boats, out in the sea, it's also quite popular. Fly fishing and trolling fishing. And actually, I'll come back to that. But trolling fishing is quite a small number of the Danish anglers, but they contribute quite a bit to the socioeconomics, because buying boats and stuff like that is quite heavily. I think that's something you were showing as well. So, a bit about angling behavior. And as a fisheries manager, I tend to get the idea that understanding the anglers, the behavior of anglers, is as important as understanding the behavior of fish in order to do proper management. And what motivates anglers? The fishery resource is a high motivation, like for the experience of the catch, to get the catch, to obtain a fish for eating. Surprisingly few, I would say, stated that it was the trophy fish that was important. Could be that this was a web panel investigation, and all the people who were really keen in fishing are also, I think, the ones who are trophy fishermen. They were out fishing, they were not part of this web panel. I don't know, but I tend to notice that these guys, at least in Denmark, are the ones who are really, really loud, very, very loud in the medias, making a lot of noise about how they would like to see things and how they would like fisheries management. But perhaps as part of the whole community, they are a minor part. As a fisheries manager, I need to take that into account. There's a whole big, very anonymous fishermen who are not very visible, which we have to take into account. We can only do that by getting an idea of who's out there fishing. So socioeconomics is important, but behavioral studies of anglers is as important. Okay, another motivation is the and physiological motivations: relaxation, reduced stress, health effects seem to be important. Getting out in the natural environment of living to experience natural surroundings is also important. But I still think that catching a fish is really important, even though you can have a very nice scenery, but if you don't catch anything, I'm not sure if you're satisfied. And that's the difference between motivations and satisfactions. And then there are social motivations to be with friends and share experience with friends and fishing buddies. So, different motivations, we need to take that into account, and we try to do that. So, a little bit about socioeconomics. From that survey, an average angler uses about €400 per year on his hobby. And it generates an economic turnover, including taxes, stuff like that, of €386 million. Facilitates employment for 2,500 people. What is that? Is that big? Is that high? I don't know. But for instance, compared to the Danish aquaculture sector, it generates amount smaller than this, employed also less people. So this is really important, and the potential is even higher. Clear. So that's good we're here, and we need to communicate how to make sure this really happens. Fishing tourism, just a small note, there was a survey made at the same time trying to estimate the impact of fishing tourism. €51 million was an impact number here. There's many Germans that come to Denmark, especially from North Germany, but they do all kinds of fishing. Put and take, coast and sea, lakes and streams. Salmon fishing in Western Jutland is becoming quite popular. We're having an increase in salmon fishing in these years in the western rivers in Jutland. And also there are several ongoing initiatives to increase tourism, maintain good fishery. We heard Gordon earlier about fishing sea lamb, a very nice initiative, good work from him. The sea trout Fyn was been involved for several years. So things are going on in Denmark. Just a little bit about the species that we catch: brown trout, pike, perch, all sorts of different species. Some pictures for you to look at. But I'd like to dwell a little bit about the salmon. We had a nice talk this morning about salmon, and it is a very interesting species, endangered species. I'd like to give you an example of some of the stuff we've been involved in. This is from the River Skjern. I mentioned it before, where we have quite a bit of salmon fishing these years. It has not always been like that. In the 80s, the salmon was almost extinct. And then in the 90s, several actions were taken. Habitat restorations, very important. They were made, the river was simply transformed. It used to be a channel, transformed into a new, more normal shaped river. Stocking program was changed. They started to use local fish. They discovered by scale analysis, DNA samples, that there were a population of local salmon in that river. They started to breed on those, and suddenly the stocking had a huge impact. That was your point before, and I completely agree. And also a very strict regulation in the fisheries. Quotas and bag limits, very important. And you can see the result in the in the spawning run. It increased dramatically in this river following all these initiatives. And also the anglers' catch salmon in River Skjern increased dramatically after that. So, just an example of, but this was not done by one person. It was done by collaboration between a lot of interests here. So you need to work together. That's important. Fisheries management, restoration of habitat, stock enhancement, regulate fishing. These are the tools that we try to sell to the anglers when they come and ask us what do we do. There are 3 tools that you can really work on here. And I'm not going to this, but just give you an example of restoration of habitats. This is a mill dam for one of the biggest rivers in Denmark, River Gudenåen. And this was not blown into bits. It was removed by machinery, but still you get the idea. This is before and this is after, and now this is a very nice place for small brown trout to grow up and brown trout to spawn. So very, very powerful. This is very, very powerful. Remove the obstacles and you get free passage, migration of these migratory species. Most powerful tool we have. Stock enhancements. In Denmark we tend to stock less and less and less. We want to do habitat restoration instead of stocking. But when we stock, we try to use wild fish. And this is some of the percentage of hatchery fish used in stocking compared to wild fish. You can see there's an increase, and now we almost exclusively use fish that are taken. We catch fish in the rivers, we strike these, and we release them as young fish. And finally, we try to regulate fishing, and we have like mandatory regulations, but we also try to encourage the private fishing clubs to make voluntarily regulations, because this is also very effective. Size loss, for instance, as I've been communicating with Gordon about several times. Okay, before I stop, some challenges as I see it. Right? Yesterday, Jan Kappel talked about climate changes, what we do about it. Well, I agree, but I do not fully agree that we cannot do anything about it. We cannot do something about the climate changes, but we can be prepared to what's going to happen if and when they come, to try to look at how can the rivers, for instance, cope with all the water that will come. Can we do something? Can we change the way we manage our water system, stuff like that? So I think that we can try to predict what will happen and try to be prepared to what will happen. This is a very hot topic, I think, which we have to take seriously. The whole welfare, animal ethics thing, at least in the European Commission, that's something that they agree that fish feel pain, as I understand it, and that's but I mean, this is the debate, and it's very emotional debate, and there was a report in Denmark about this, and the report actually said that put and take fishing should be abandoned, and live bait should not be used anymore. Catch and release were critical if it's only done for fun. It has to have a reason, like for regulations and stuff like that. This is something that is growing, it will keep on growing. So we have to take that seriously. User conflicts, inter and intersectoral, between anglers and commercial fishermen. There's a lot of potential conflicts. They're happening all the time. And as a fisheries manager, you're in the middle of that, trying to facilitate good solutions there. Predation conflicts, we have cormorants, big issue in Denmark, eating a lot of fish. Invasive species, recruitment of young anglers been mentioned. I agree, this is a problem, we need to handle that. And something which I would really like to emphasize, and I take hats off for, that was the presentation by Dan yesterday, who showed this site-specific management, as we do it in the US all the time. That we try to look at the different waters that we have, what can they produce, what kind of fishery can we have here, and we do management according to that, instead of having like overall rules, which I think we need to be more specific. That's my point. And to cope with all these, monitoring of fish populations is important, and that is why I think that we need to think out of the box here as well. I completely agree with the fish brain. This is something that we could use data for. All this is something we could use mobile data for to do this better. I'll talk more about that tomorrow because I have another talk there. Yeah, I will not go into that. Just say that this report was also mentioned this morning by Jim, and I'd like to emphasize it as well. It's a really nice report. You can find it on it's free to find it on the internet, and it's really nice to read, to get an idea about what we're talking about. So I can only recommend it. So thank you very much.